Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Phillip Siddiq Show. We have with us for the film Burden, Andrew Heckler, director, writer, and Robbie Brenner, producer of this well-produced film. I've seen it. I'm not giving anything away from anything, but it's a story that needs to be told, and it needs to be, should I say, experienced. So first of all, welcome to the show, you guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so how did you guys get involved with this project?
So it was luck. I mean, I read a blurb in a small southern newspaper in 1996 that said Klansman opens KKK museum in small southern town square. And so that really threw me in 1996 to think that this overt kind of bigotry and racism could still exist, you know. But before I got to dig in further, in 1997, I read another article that said Klansman sells KKK museum to Black Baptist minister. And I nearly fell off my chair. I was like, what the heck is going on in this town? So I picked up the phone. I called the Reverend Kennedy, who's the minister himself, and I said, can I come on down there? And he said, sure, it's free country. So down I went and ended up spending quite a bit of time in Lawrence, South Carolina and surrounding areas researching the movie and finding out what it was all about. And, you know, the second you meet these people and the second you sort of feel the town, you feel obligated to tell this story because the story had so much meaning to me that I was sure it means something to other people as well.
And you, how did you get involved with it? And when you found out about the film, what were you like, I don't know, or did you jump in with both feet?
Yeah, so Andrew and I have known each other for several decades, and the script kind of arrived on my desk in early 2000. And I read the script, and I was just absolutely blown away by it. I thought it was just amazing, and it just grabbed a hold of me, and I just could never let go of it. I thought about it all the time, and it was spoken for at that moment, and I had another job. And so I think Andrew and I spoke several years after that, and I said, what's going on with Burden? And he said, let's do it. And we started the journey together, and it's been a long, wonderful, winding, amazing road.
Long is the key word, and winding for sure.
That's a song somewhere, The Long and Winding Road.
Yes.
Beatles reference, guys. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, the truth is that when Robbie jumped in 2004, 2005, you know, she was relentless, you know, committed, determined, and never let it go. I mean, you know, and that's the only reason we're standing here today is because of Robbie Brenner. You know, other than that,
well, you need the screenplay and, you know, the ability to be able to direct an amazing movie. So I'd say we were a good partnership.
Yeah. Now, what was the shooting schedule and the filming in the South? Because I know it gets very hot. I have relatives down there. It gets extremely hot. How did you guys work all that out?
So it was actually sort of perfect. I mean, we and not for any, you know, any predetermination. I mean, we had Forrest Whitaker signed on to the movie in you want to? Yes. Forrest Whitaker signed on to the movie in 2006. I met Forrest, and then we met subsequently several times from 2006. I don't think he knew it would take 10 years to be on set, but he never let go. He was always involved. And so, you know, Robbie got a call that Forrest had, you know, wanted to know what was going on with Burden. He had 3 weeks available in October. And this was in July when they called.
Yeah.
So that sort of planted a flag for Robbie. I'll let her tell more of that. But we knew we had 3 weeks in October to make this movie with Forrest Whitaker, and so we just ran to that date. We didn't have the money. We didn't have the other actors. We didn't have much. We had Forrest. And so, you know, we ended up shooting in the middle of, literally the middle of the state in Georgia, in a two small towns in Georgia. So it was quite temperate, actually.
Okay, Robbie.
Yeah, so I did indeed. I got a phone call from Forrest's agent and manager, and they said, you know, Forrest, he had always, you know, really, really liked the script, and he had a personal connection to it. And so he, in that his uncle was a preacher. And so I think he liked the idea of sort of taking on the role, and he connected with Andrew and loved the story. And so they told me that he was doing Steve McQueen's movie on one side and he was going to go play Desmond Tutu on the other side, and we had 3 weeks. And I said, well, great, that's when we're going to shoot the movie. That's what we were thinking. So I said, Andrew, are you ready to make the movie? And he said, well, can we do it in January? And I said, no, you got to, when you have momentum in movie world, you got to lean into it and go. And so we didn't have the financing, we didn't have much, but we just kind of, we planted a flag and we never looked back.
I will say this: the good news about only having Forrest Whitaker attached to the screenplay at that point is that having Forrest Whitaker is like having honey for bees. You know what I mean? Like he was,
That guy's good,
yeah, he's pretty good. You know, and so it was really great to have him because it attracted a lot of attention and a lot of other actors to the project.
Now, filming those scenes, I would say the old guard black folks against almost the younger guard black folks, a generational divide. How did you put that scene together? And then when they met the Klan, and what tensions? I mean, how did you do all that?
Well, you know, in researching the movie when I was down there, and you know, it's not a documentary, so there's license, but you know, I had heard, you know, from the Reverend Kennedy and from others that there was, you know, he's a Black Baptist minister, and so it's all about Jesus and Christ. I had heard that at the time also there was a lot of, you know, a lot of sort of a much harder line from the youth about how to respond to the Klan. They wanted to respond in kind, you know, Malcolm X and violence and, you know, the Muslim Brotherhood, and they really wanted to go after them. So it wasn't like when you go down there, it doesn't become black and white. There's a lot of gray when you study these people and a lot of personality. So you had, you know, sort of the people that believed in Martin Luther King, really like the Reverend, and nonviolence. And then you have other people that wanted to be more aggressive. And then you have the Klan. And the Klan also is a lot grayer than you think it is. You know, when we think of the Klan, we think, oh, just a bunch of guys who hate black people. Well, that's not the way it really is. It's a bunch of guys who hate change.
Right.
So they like the status quo of the 1940s, the 1950s. If they could have anything, they would have that back, where African Americans were sort of like, you know, funny and didn't want to hold public office and didn't even need to vote, and they wanted that. Right. That's what they would aspire to. And so that's sort of where the line in the movie, and there's a line where, you know, Judy says to Mike, so the love interest says to Mike, and she says, you know, yeah, she basically calls him on it. And we don't think about it when we're entrenched in a certain position and certain racism or bigotry thinking. We don't think about the end game anymore. We just know what we've learned, what we've been taught. And so Judy says to him, you know, so let's say you win and you chase all the blacks out of Lawrence, then what? And Mike literally sits there and goes, you know, and Garrett does it perfectly and goes like, I don't know. Because he doesn't really think about it like that. Like, if you win, if you accomplish the goal of the Klan, then what happens? Well, nothing. And she then says, you know, we'd still be white trash with no one to step on to make us feel better. And that comes right out of that whole thing. Because it's like, you're not really thinking this through. You know, and a lot of African Americans point out, see, that line lets us know that it's a white problem. And what they always say is, because without us, you're completely lost. You have to admit what you are, which is, you know, left behind, disenfranchised, not heard.
Yeah. And Mike, his character was, I would say, broken. I mean, the military, and when he described the story about that, you know, I was like, oh my goodness. And then he and another character used to play together when they were kids.
Yeah, an African-American character. I mean, the whole point of it, you know, there's so many grays in the movie and so many little anecdotes in the movie that come from a reality, a real reality. You know, that no one's born a racist. You know, you're not coming out of the womb going, I hate Jews, or I hate Mexicans, or I hate black people. You just aren't. You know, you're taught that. And what I like to say is that, you know, that when you're vulnerable, when you have a poor family situation, or your abuse, or your economic position, you know, you're vulnerable to being hijacked by these families of hatred, you know, and Mike had those in spades. And so he was the perfect candidate. You know, when you think of Mike Burden, I mean, he's so tough, and he's a real tough guy. Yeah. You don't think he's vulnerable. He's extremely vulnerable. Given other circumstances, he could have been a poet. I mean, the guy writes poetry. It's, you know, so when you think of like a Klansman, he's the enforcer of the Klan, and yet he's writing love poetry. That's sort of that's when you get in the good stuff in filmmaking. That's when you get the good stuff, you know.
Tell us about some of another gem you dropped in the film was some of the African Americans fought on the Confederate side. A lot of people they said no, you're wrong, you're wrong. They did because I think that was their home.
Yeah, so I mean, Robbie knows that that not only did I spend a lot of time down there, but when I go and research anything, we're working on a couple movies where it's sort of insane. I put aside all my personal beliefs. I go and I listen to people, and I try to understand them, and I try to empathize with them. I try to understand their positions, no matter how diametrically opposed they are from my positions. I put them away. I spent a lot of time when we were filming on the weekends. Everybody went off and did their thing, and I would stay down there, and I'd go and I'd have, I'd go with people from that area. I went to the municipal water, the sanitation and water department had a picnic on Sundays. I went to that with a couple people. I hung out with all these people, and so you get the sort of the truth of how they feel about the Klan. And that's a lot of the rhetoric that is in the movie, which is, the Klan really isn't a racist organization at all. The Klan was like local justice. And I'm like, really? Really? You think that that's local justice? They say, yeah, they'll do a white person too if they're acting out of line. I'm like, really? And so you listen to all this, and one of the other things is that a lot of people bring up down there is, yes, this concept of, this is all part of history. I mean, the fact that you're berating the Confederate flag, well, blacks fought for the Confederacy too, And you're like, oh, that's a good justification for it. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't patronize them. I don't patronize people in general. I listen to them. I try to understand if that really is a position that you can get behind. And it is. I mean, it's a position that they have. It's that we're it's sort of Northerners, L.A., New York, Chicago, the elites. We're the people that are racist. We're the people that are marginalizing people. That in the South, it's and to a certain extent, it's not true. I mean, when you go to these small Southern towns, black and white are always together in the diners and the restaurants and on the streets everywhere. When you go to Los Angeles, that ain't the case. Try going to Malibu. Yeah. There's not a black person in Malibu. Well, I'm sorry, there's 3. I asked the other day. Go to Los Angeles. The neighborhoods are very segregated. We don't call it racism. We don't call it bigotry. We call it economics. Yeah. So it's to digest all of that and not, make caricatures, stereotypes, not make judgments, but to actually try to portray it in a movie where you're trying to show people warts and all, black and white.
We got to wrap this interview up, but you guys, thank you so much. I mean, we've just spoken with Andrew Heckler, director, writer, Robbie Brenner, producer for Burden. Thank you both. I mean, we could talk for an hour on this, get deeper. Thank you.